possibility of a new mysticism, about which Teilhard speaks a great deal, provides a powerful focus of attraction. It leads us into the world rather than out of it. The mysticism of action, closely linked to evolution, can inspire the spiritualization of human beings in and through the unification of the world. The ascent of humanity is more than an ascent to knowledge. Humankind is called to the height of the spirit, but nobody can reach this summit on their own in separation from others. The present generation will only follow the call to such an ascent if a dynamic and action-oriented spirituality becomes a true driving force of contemporary society and is nourished by convergent approaches of science, religion, and mysticism that can ensure an harmonious future of all life and humanity on Earth. Now, I had another section on Carter Phipps's book Evolutionary, which also talks about evolutionary spirituality, but I think it's getting too long. But what I want to say in conclusion, Teilhard's very first essay, written in 1916 during the First World War, was called Cosmic Life, and he describes his temptation to pantheism, to be immersed in the kind of divine experience of nature, like you have it in some of the nature quotes. But he gets away from this, and this was an experience he largely had in the Egyptian desert when he was fossil hunting. He wrote this essay. He felt really that with the real understanding of evolution, he had suddenly got a vision which gave him a very powerful drive and a mission to make people see things differently. And so he always speaks about seeing, and when you read the forward to the book, The Phenomenon of Man, or the Human Phenomenon, it's about seeing more deeply, seeing more widely, seeing by bringing, connecting, relating things and other aspects of your experience, bringing them into context with each other, in contact with each other. Now, he wrote this essay, Cosmic Life, at one of the worst and most violent battles of the First World War, where he writes, "I'm writing out of an exuberance of life." That's in the middle of the deaths of the First World War. And the essay has the motto, there is a communion with God, which is a traditional kind of religious, vertical. There's a communion with God. There's a communion with Earth, which is a horizontal, not only pantheism and natural mysticism, but also socialism. The people who are involved in a kind of social mysticism who just want to develop humanity, only humanity. But he says, look, there's a communion with God, there's a communion with Earth, and there is a communion with God through Earth, and that's, he calls, the third way, the diagonal path. You bring that together to not worship the world, but to really contribute to the whole rise of the world evolving in its full sense, in all its possibilities. And that means a great deal when you bring this down to the what we can all do and what we can do together, and the more we can do together, the better. But in that he sees a divine, a mystical, a spiritual kind of dynamic and element. I think this is very, very important. If you understand that, then you understand Teilhard. Thank you.
Yeah. We have time for questions. True to your promise, thank you. Well, everything you didn't say will come out in answer to questions.
So when will the printed version of the whole story come out? You guys do have that around.
Sorry?
When will a printed version of the whole story come out?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, this is what's the word? Patchwork from different lectures that I've given, or articles I've written, or articles I'm going to write. this version is unique to this group. I mean, it's, you know, it's one version, and then there'll be another version. What I'm interested in, and I have this particularly in my book, and I have got this the spirituality book. What I'm very interested in, and what I've developed more since writing this book, is to develop ideas that are, how should I say, that can help us to develop greater spiritual literacy. When I was in Australia and went around the mangroves, one of the biologists who was leading us, he talked about the pneumatophores. Now, I don't know whether there are any biological scientists here. This is a term from plant sciences, and it's the word pneuma, spirit, and phoron, that means to carry. Pneumatophores are the aerial roots that nourish plants whose roots don't go into the ground, but they are nourished by the air. So they carry the air, the spirit, if you like. Now, if you use, I use this word metaphorically. We need pneumatophores. We need more ideas, more powerful, more engaging, more inspiring ideas, exemplars, attitudes to change. You know, some people, you need ideas that generate change, ideas that make evolution or make our evolutionary collaboration more spiritual, in quotation mark. In other words, that really provide a dynamic which at the moment we don't have, because we look at everything from a material and social point of view and from a financial point of view. We see the interdependencies around the globe in terms of, you know, human populations, and health and food distribution and so on, and industry, but we don't look at the spiritual interdependence, which is primary to all this, and which is so essential, and which we haven't actually systematically studied, except some exceptional individuals like Sri Aurobindo, or Roger Steiner, or Teilhard, or some people who have really given these more universalizing ideas really serious attention. Most people don't give these questions any attention. You know, and I could have quoted you, I've got lovely passages from Teilhard, how most people just live to earn their money, eat their bread, get to a good old age, and that's it. You know, and he says, doesn't humanity wake up? Is that enough? Is that all you want? Don't you want more? This is what he writes. You see, humanity has come to a stage now, the compression is so strong upon us that we have to think about what is all this about? You know, this is not enough just to have enough to eat. Even for, you know, it's very important for those who have nothing to eat. But if you have too much to eat and too much to do and too much to think, what is it all about? You see, and these are really very, very fundamental questions which really the human community has to address. So I feel really he has got a lot to say, and we need these pneumatophores. We need ideas about the spirit, ideas that can, you know, that can convey to us a different vision, to give us a different kind of life, not just, you know, my own self-satisfaction, I'm content, you know, everything is fine, but for the community and for humanity at the species level. And I think this is really very powerful stuff. So, any more questions?
Yes.
Yes.
There will be more questions.
Okay, fire questions at me.
I have a question. First of all, thank you very much for such a deep and heartfelt and profound presentation. And your book, Spirit of Fire, has taught me that I always thought it is so difficult to introduce Teilhard to someone who doesn't know the thought of Teilhard. And after reading your book, I realized that you made it possible.
Thank you, thank you.
My question in particular is related to your final statements of the bridge between the scientific rational and the mystical experience and attitude of humanity. And listening to your talk, I feel that Teilhard is an incarnation of the Pythagorean spirit in many ways. That Pythagoras, for example, saw that science itself was a mystical experience. What I'm curious about is what reasons can you see humanity felt a need to separate those two, make them distinct paths. Create, in some sense, the dialectic tension that allows for Teilhard to come to this point of desiring a convergence of those two spirits of humanity. A different way of asking is, would you say that it was a necessary move in human evolution that those two paths separated? Inevitable in some sense.
Perhaps it was. I have no clear answer to this. That question has been asked by many people. You see, if you retrace the path of human evolution, you have to go through the history of humankind. And the question is really, this is really about historical philosophy or philosophy of history. Is this kind of new thinking about evolutionary stages of development that go to a higher level of development? Is this something which is very, very new, very modern, or even postmodern? Or is this something that has always been there? You see, I think a lot of people confuse evolution just simply with development in terms of change, and a lot of history has been a succession of, one reigning tribe governing a group after another. And when you look at human evolution, human development in terms of history, there has first been the development in terms of, it's connected with numbers and with complexity, how human groups have covered the globe, how there were many, virgin territories where there were no human people for much of human history, whereas now, there are human people, human groups everywhere, and we find these different cultures. We know of the great wisdom, and you mentioned Pythagoras and what the ancient Greeks saw, you could say the ancient Hindus, the indigenous people. All these sources of wisdom that Thomas Berry speaks about. I really feel now we have come to a stage that we are, for the first time in human history, able to correlate and coordinate these questions. Before, this was technically and materially not possible. You see, the span of human life was too short. It's the same with gender developments. I work a lot on religion and gender. It's the same. It is basically a fundamental revolution, which is ultimately also a spiritual revolution, but it's at first a demographic and material and social revolution, which is possible because of our longer lifespans. You see, you don't have to spend your life just bearing children as a woman and just seeing your children grow and then you die. You have a lot of energy and creativity besides having 1, 2, or 3, or even 4 children. I have 4 children. The point is, our conditions have changed so fundamentally that we're into a new run of complexity, and they have to actually think, what does this really imply? In the past, a lot of these things were possible for particular individuals. So you have outstanding women mystics, or you have outstanding thinkers like Pythagoras or Plato. Today, all this, it's not at the level of the individual anymore, only at the level of the individual. It's at the level of the collective. That the group is much larger. Far more people have access to education, to develop their power of the imagination, their power of creativity. Think how many artists we have, how many musicians we have, how many, skiers, sportsmen, sportswomen. We have just had the Olympics in London, and a great thing was said all the time, for every representative group from every country, for the first time, women are in the games, and women, even if it's only one woman, like from Saudi Arabia or somewhere. But this is a new thing. This is a first in the history of the games. You could say the same about the religions. Women are far more active in religion now than they've ever been. But you see, you have to see that this was only possible to particular individuals in the past, whereas now the name of the game has changed because it's become a complex collective activity. Collective not meaning everybody, but meaning that groups, small groups, bigger groups, larger groups, are doing things which before only particularly endowed or particularly well-suited individuals. And that changes the nature of what is happening. And You see, it's very, once you start thinking about this systematically, it is so exciting because a new world opens before us. It's threatening. It's very threatening because it's the unknown also. But you can also see the positive side of it. You know, see the positive side of the internet. I haven't talked about this at all, but how Teilhard is sometimes called the prophet of the internet because he talked about this interconnection and human thinking linking up with each other and how, you know, he would have loved the internet. I think he would have absolutely adored it. But it means, you know, something new in a way is possible, which was never, ever dreamt of, because the material constellations were not right. But the material constellations are more than material conditions. They are allowing openings to new intellectual, collaborative, political, economic, and spiritual developments which were not possible in the past. And this is why I argue against a static understanding of spirituality. It's not enough to do the spirituality of the past, whether it's Christian, Hindu, Jewish, Muslim, it doesn't matter. You need the transposition of that into a dynamic evolutionary framework, because things are possible today which were never ever possible before. It's a new, we are on a new planet, you know, we are on the same planet, but the planet has taken on a different face, a different configuration, and we're in a different world, literally. So, you know, it is very exciting, and I think this makes it exciting to bring up youngsters, to involve them, to see what they can do and how they can make a commitment rather than withdraw and not make a commitment. You see what I mean? Because you have so many possibilities which none of our forebears ever had in the same way. Some exceptional individuals, yes, but they were the absolute minority. Whereas today, you know, we're in the millions. Another question.
Could you say something about the state of the noosphere? Is it something that's incipient? Is it waking up, or was it always part of the human milieu? What is your reading on the noosphere? Is it something we look toward the future, some kind of manifestation, or is it like a living thing that's slowly waking up? How do you see it?
I think more the latter, I would say. I don't know how you say it, but I think, you know, it's a potential, it's a possibility, but it's also already reality. You know, Teilhard, this is where it's very interesting to study his vocabulary, which is very fluid and which makes him a very difficult reader, a very difficult writer to read, because he talks about noogenesis, the birth of more thinking, of co-reflective thinking, of a new kind of thinking, in a new kind of work. At the same time, thought is almost as ancient as Homo sapiens, you see? And you get these examples of great outstanding thinker in every culture. But, you know, now, I think we see exponential growth and involvement of a much larger group. We're into a new era of the noosphere. Now, the question is, will the noosphere mature to more spiritual, self-reflective and self-transcendent way of being? That is, you know, I'm not a prophet, you can't foretell this. I would hope that this is possible. Many people hope that this is possible, but it's not possible by just the repetition of traditional religious and philosophical teachings, because they are all too narrow. They're too narrow, they're too stuck in the past. Teilhard used to say the religions are still in the Stone Age, in the Stone Age. You know, it's not reformulated in an evolutionary, dynamic, and organic way of being, which we need. And so, you know, the noosphere, it is taking shape. It is finding more of a physiognomy and an expression. But, you know, it happens in leaps and bounds. There may be progress and there may be regress. You know, it depends which people are in charge or what kind of education we give to our young people. I mean, the young people have the future in their hands. What do we convey to our youngsters? You know, what do we give our children? What do we provide as an example for our world? that's, I mean, when you think of the Western military-industrial complex of violence, which is enormously destructive. You know, the 20th century has been called the most violent century in history, and the 21st century doesn't look to be any better. So, you know, what is this? Is this a way of being human, to destroy the human, to destroy life? I mean, the ecological disasters, how far are we responsible for this? Are we really trying really hard to develop sustainable living in a balance? See, this is all part of the noosphere. You know, what do we do with our environment? And that includes our human social environment. I mean, these are very weighty questions. And I'm, you know, I have no answer to them directly, but I know that we have to think about these questions. We have to do something about them.
Following more or less on the same topic, I'm curious about Teilhard's attitude toward war. I mean, he writes these amazing essays in the trench in the First World War. Quite a meaningless war with horrible suffering. Now, Jung and Aurobindo both considered the Second World War to be a battle on the ground of higher forces. I don't see anything in Teilhard about these higher beings fighting it out through the French and the German or the British or whatever. He doesn't seem to have a sort of a second level of war, and I don't know that he did for the Second World War either. Is that, what do you make of that?
Second World War, he was too far removed. He was prisoner basically in Beijing. You see, he was too far removed to what is happening in the Second World War. The First World War, I mean, I've heard Gabriel Marcel talking about this. You know, people have said, yeah, you know, he's an inhuman being. He doesn't show any compassion for these dying soldiers, but I don't know whether that's not doing a great injustice. You see, what he writes personally about suffering, you can see in his words when you read the war essays that he was very much there with the suffering. He was constantly at the battle, at the forefront of the battle, taking dying soldiers back to the back of the battle. You know? And what is so amazing, I mean, we would perhaps like to see more reflection on this. This, you know, he was really a man moving forward, but he felt that in spite of the war, something new was being born there. He felt that humanity, what was for him quite an amazing experience is he came from a very traditional French Catholic aristocratic milieu, very protected schooling, living with Jesuits in an order, and suddenly he's thrown into this absolutely extraordinary war theater, and he experiences not just the German and the French, but all these people from the then French colonial empire, people from Vietnam who were fighting first, people from North Africa, people from everywhere, and he experienced humanity as a diversity of people, extraordinary diversity, even though it was by no means the whole of humanity. And that made him, you know, before that, he had experienced nature, he had experienced God, but he had never really experienced humanity outside his family and outside the narrow French milieu. So suddenly he's thrown into this milieu, and he meets many people who are not believers at all, among the officers and among some of the soldiers. And then what is so extraordinary, I mean, this is from a phenomenological point of view and personal point of view, very, very extraordinary. This man was a stretcher bearer, always at the front of fighting, taking dying soldiers back or wounded soldiers back. He did not have as much as one shell or any wound in the entire First World War. He got two war distinctions from the French for his extraordinary courage of going so close to the battle zone, saving people's lives. And the Muslim soldiers, they used to speak about him as the Sidi Marabout, which is a Sufi expression in North Africa for really an enlightened mystic who is blessed by the barakah, by the power of God. He's a man of God, He's tied to God like a camel to a post, and he is so firmly close to God that nothing happens to him. I mean, when you think about it, it's extraordinary. When you think of the hundreds of thousands of people who were killed in the First World War, some of the young men just, volunteering, going to the war, being dead the next day, you think, how did this man survive? How did he survive? It's extraordinary. But not only how did he survive, how did he produce his essays in that situation? It was extraordinary. I mean, you can't make this square. This is just so extraordinary. And it shaped him for life. I mean, I call it the crucible of fire. See, he has got this fire symbolism. I call his mysticism a fire and heart mysticism because he uses the metaphor of the heart and of the fire a great deal in his work. The fire that has got hold of him, and the fire of his vision, and the fire he wants to, he looks quite a kind of French ascetic kind of man when you see him, but he had this extraordinary fire in him. And it is to do with this dynamic of evolution. He sees something in the world, and he sees the world as a whole at a time when very few people had global visions in the 1920s and 1930s. You see, so he constantly gets into arguments, or not only with his own order, but also in, you see, what is also quite extraordinary is how his thought got diffused at a very early age. I've only learned this quite recently by reading. There's a correspondence between him and the Beguines. The Beguines were another aristocratic family where the father was a prehistorian, became professor of prehistory, and the three sons also were very involved, finding these Lascaux caves and not Lascaux, but similar kind of prehistoric paintings in some of the caves in southern France. And he became very friendly. Teilhard became very friendly with the son of Max Beguin, and he's called the son of Henri Beguin is called Max Beguin, and his wife Simone. And this man, this aristocratic man, he went into business. He set up a big business, and eventually went off to Morocco to produce rose water for the French perfume industry. It's quite concrete, I think. And there's this correspondence going on between Teilhard, and these were some of his very, very close friends, some of the closest he had. And he conveyed his idea and his way of thinking about a greater humanity and working together. And Beguin, he tried to set up a cooperative kind of farm setup for these Moroccan workers. And he ran all the time into trouble with the French colonial administration, who didn't want this. They wanted a really patriarchal colonial regime. And they resisted this, and they constantly discussing this correspondence. How do you work in new ways? What do you do differently? And what is interesting is that Simone, the wife of this man, she started very early on, in the 1926 or so, she suggested, instead of Teilhard just typing his essays, she would type them and then radiograph them, multiply them before you have photocopying anything, so that more than one person could read them. So they started having a kind of, like you might say, a club, and he produced all the time his essays that way. And when the Beguins went off to live in Morocco in the 1936 or so, Mademoiselle Mortier came along, another French woman, and she continued this method of production. And they had a whole fan club, you might say, and he would send out these essays. You see, this one, first thing on it, then Mademoiselle Mortier, they would reproduce his essays. But I had no idea. Teilhard used to speak about his clandestine, his secret writing. It's almost like Soviet Samizdat's literature, going underground, because he was not officially allowed to publish anything. They were just going to the people who were interested in his ideas. Some were Jesuits, never mind. The others were friends, and friends of friends, and friends in the United States, and friends in England. And I really had no idea how much of a business this was, how extensive these essays were produced. For example, in 1938, just shortly before the outbreak of Second World War, Teilhard wrote an essay, "Let us save humanity." Sauvons l'humanité. And he said, produced 10,000 copies of that. I mean, that's a hell of a lot of numbers of copies. I thought, where are the 10,000 recipients and read of? You know, and they were probably not just read by one person, but each one might have been read by 2 or 3 persons. I thought, my goodness, I had no idea they were going out all over the place like this. Just think of the postage thing. I mean, they had to do this physically. This was not sending an email and attachment, you know, to your whole whole list of recipients. No, they had to post this and stick it in an envelope and put a stamp on it. 10,000 copies, can you believe it? I mean, that's a lot of work. And so it went on. So wherever you went, there were always people who use essays and who had read this, and who were discussing this. And then the essays, you know, they were written in French. And then you would have people like Ursula Swan in Beijing. She would immediately translate everything into English and would go out to the English speaking. So he had to really, you know, he radiated outwards quite a bit, and his ideas became known among quite a large circle of friends. But even though you couldn't buy them in any bookshop, it was not that people didn't see them. So it's interesting now. You know, he must have firmly believed in the value of doing all this, because just think how much time this takes and how much you have to think about. So,
It's in the metaphor.
Ursula, just a quick question. All these years in Beijing, did Teilhard study the language or speak?
No, he said his sister went out before him, his older sister, who he was very close to. She was a nun, and she went out to work for lepers, and she died of smallpox before Teilhard actually went out there. But she learned the language because she worked closely with the people. She only spent 3 or 4 years there. Teilhard sometimes expressed the wish, he wished he could speak the language, but he never had any time, and then he never put any time aside. And the Chinese he worked with were all English or French speaking, you know, and some had studied in England or in the United States or wherever. And he sent also students over to France. So he didn't learn the language, no. I mean, he certainly didn't know the culture very deeply. That is certainly true, because he was in touch with Western-oriented scientists. Yes?
Thank you very much. You talked about the activation of the taste of life.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could suggest any specific readings on that, and also elaborate on that.
I would have to guide you to essays. I have to look those up where they are now. Le goût de vivre is the taste for life, is the zest for living, it's translated as in English. I think that may be in the volume on the activation of energy. Some essays are put together. You know, there's one volume called Human Energy, and another volume of lectures of essays called The Activation of Energy, which is quite a good good title. It's about the activation, not just the preservation, but the further activation of human energy. I mean, it's a very new thought, certainly in the 1930s and 40s. See, he wrote a very good essay called The Spirit of the Earth, Spirit of on Earth, how we have to build the Earth. He speaks about the architects of the future. Where are the men, where are the people, in other words, the human beings who have this vision that they can see that humanity has a future in common, that we have one origin, we are all from the same species, even though we are different ethnic groups. We have one origin, and we have one destiny. We are all in this together, and we can't really exclude anybody. It's about inclusion, it's about the understanding of diversity. I mean, he has marvelous passages of how diversity is really an enrichment. You know, it's not uniformity, it's diversity in trying to relate to the other in a creative and responsive way. I mean, he has, you see, this was not natural to him. He originally said, you know, when you think, particularly when you are a single celibate religious, the other, he says in one of his writings, the other, you know, the other is an obstacle. It's difficult to cope with. How do you respond to the otherness of others? I mean, this has become a very common theme now, but it certainly wasn't in Teilhard's time. He learned about the other through his experience in the war. through the diversity of people. And you have there are many testimonies from people from very different walks of life about Teilhard relating to them. And it was said about him, he could relate whether it was, to a poor Chinese beggar or domestic in France, or to a high aristocrat, or a poet and writer like Claudel, or a philosopher. He really opened up to a person in the, to the center of this person. This is really what one would call a dialogical attitude. He was always interested in relating to people, in responding to people, in finding out about people, in trying to understand, even when he found it difficult to understand them because they were too different. You see, so you have a whole palette of human experiences and emotions there, which I find enormously enriching. And if you read, if you haven't read anything by Teilhard, read the letters from a traveler. You get his very lyrical descriptions of different landscapes and of different people, but also how he reacts to different parts of the globe when he goes to different countries, and what kind of questions this raises for him, and what he sees and admires in it. So it's very, very interesting. Sorry, yes, please.
Ursula, could you say something about his attraction to women,
Yeah.
and the way women were attracted to him, and then also the way he had such deeply loving, but also romantic in a certain way, relationships with women, remained celibate, and how this actually either affected or participated in his creativity.
Well, he has this, this is in his also the heart of matter, how for him, what he calls the feminine. He sees the feminine as a unitive. Now that's a very abstract way of talking, and it's very difficult. I would say the critical side first before I talk about the post side. From a contemporary feminist point of view, you could provide some critique of his one-sided essentialist understanding of the feminine, and how the feminine gets equated too easily with particular women, which doesn't really work. And the feminine, for him, he has dedications to Beatrix, like Dante. The feminine is also for him Mary in the church. So, the interpretations of that has been too spiritualizing, too abstract. He was very much influenced by his mother and by some of his sisters. He was very deeply in love with his cousin Marguerite, whom he had known as a child and spent holidays with and so on. And she was one of the first women to study philosophy, and she became the headmistress of a very well-known Catholic girls' school in Paris, which Teilhard then discovered as a grown-up man, in his 30s, meeting this cousin again, who he had not seen since his childhood. And she was very well connected in terms of knowing people in salons. She introduced him to Leontine Zanta, who was the most extraordinary woman, who was a philosopher, had worked on the Stoics, who helped him a lot to understand classical philosophy, and with whom made a long correspondence, Leontine Zanta. And she was an early feminist who influenced Simone de Beauvoir. So he knew quite extraordinary women, very highly educated women, and he was very attracted to women. And I think it's also the emotional and the feeling side and the poetic side, maybe. He was very attractive himself. I'm sure he was very attractive. And he was attracted to his brother. I tell you a little anecdote. When I did my research, I was long dead. I went to see his brother, who was an elderly man by then. He said to me, "Mon frère, il était attiré par le charme des femmes." My brother, he was very attracted by the charm of women. So he was, I think he was a very sensitive man who was very open to poetry, to music, to the beauty of nature, and to the beauty of people. And he loved to have discussions, and I think he could open himself often to women more than to his brother Jesuits. You know, it's very interesting that Père Leroy, who I knew quite well, who was a biologist, who worked with Teilhard during the war in China, and they set up an institute of geobiology. When Teilhard was very friendly with Lucille Swan, an American sculptor who had gone to China after a failed marriage, and she was very adventurous, and she was, you know, she had left Episcopalianism behind, and she was interesting. She was part of the expatriate milieu in Paris, and Teilhard met her in, I think, at a dinner party in 1932, and he was very attracted to her, and she was very attracted to him, and there's a very fine correspondence between the two. And she sculpted him. He said for her, has done a very beautiful bust of him. And she used to live in a little temple, as you know, some of these spare temples became very nice residences for Western expatriates. And she used to invite him for tea every afternoon. He used to go after his work, and he finished his lamp work. 5 o'clock, he used to go there for tea, and they used to have endless discussions. So she translated a lot of his work, including part of Phenomenon of Man, I think. But she very much wanted to marry him, and she tried to encourage him when he was in very great difficulties about his own position with his own order, because he couldn't publish, he couldn't lecture on his ideas, to leave the Jesuit and marry him, but he wouldn't do that, because he felt it would be unfaithful to his own vision and mission, and he could only, his message made only sense if he was faithful to his own way of understanding it. So he resisted this very strongly. But he was deeply influenced, I think, by the way women saw things and feel things. And Père Leroy, his much younger Jesuit collaborator, told me personally, he said, I had no idea that Teilhard had such a close relationship with Lucille Swan when we lived in Beijing. He said, I had no idea. We used to meet each other at breakfast, we used to just discuss our work. We never ever discussed any of these personal matters. See, for him it was a way of relating and of living his personal anxieties in some cases, but also his joys of sharing things which he couldn't share in this kind of monastic community. And when he lived in New York in the last few years of his life, it was the same thing. And it's a tragedy when you read the correspondence. Lucille Swan, in her old age, she lives in Washington. Teilhard lives the last 2 years in New York. She goes sometimes to see him, but the relationship is somehow fractured because she left in the middle of the war when the expatriates could still get out. She left Beijing and went back to the States, so for many years there was no correspondence. Then he comes back to the West, but he then goes to the States, and he knows the wife of Helmut Teilhard, who he was a German paleontologist, and his wife was also American, but she was divorced from him by then, and she lived in New York. And he used to go to her apartment for afternoon tea. She lived in Manhattan, lived very far. So, you know, he died in her apartment. He wanted to die at Easter, and he died on Easter Day. He went to Mass in the, what is this church called in Manhattan? I can't remember now. Anyway, after church, they went to some concert in the afternoon, or wanted to go to some concert, I can't remember. He went to her apartment to have tea there. Her daughter was there, and he collapses, has a heart attack, and dies. You see, so he needed really, I think, the human warmth and the friendship and the understanding which a kind of ascetic male celibate community didn't give him. You know, so I think it's a very natural kind of understanding. It shows that he was very open to really a tonality of feeling which the scientific world didn't really give him. His academic work, just working in the lab, writing up your notes, studying your fossils, giving your talks, you know. I mean, he really needed human warmth. So that's about as much as I could say, I think. I have written on this actually.
Yes, you have a very fine essay.
Yeah.
We should break.
Yeah, okay, that's I have to say it. I wasn't supposed to go for so long, was it?
That was great.
That's great.
Thank you very much.